Try not to be jealous, she said, twirling her car keys like it was just another Tuesday. I'm going on a date. Those 8 words didn't just hang in the air, they detonated. The lamp on the table hummed softly, the ice in my glass cracked, and for a second, I forgot how to breathe. She didn't blink. She was daring me to react, like my silence would somehow make her victorious. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the only thing my body could do before it broke in half. A date? I repeated, my voice shaking. She nodded, smirking like I'd just asked if water was wet. I could have begged. I could have asked who it was, why she'd do this, if she was serious. But instead, I took a slow sip of my drink and said, "Cool, just don't be surprised if I'm not here when you get back." That wiped the smirk clean off her face. She froze like a statue, keys still dangling between her fingers. For the first time in months, I saw something other than boredom or contempt in her eyes. I saw confusion, maybe even fear. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but I beat her to it. "You know what? Go," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it would tear my face apart. "Have fun. Maybe he's better at pretending you're still the woman I married." The silence after that was so heavy I thought the ceiling would cave in. She didn't respond. She just turned and walked out the door. And I sat there. I sat there with my glass of melting ice, thinking about the fact that maybe I'd been blind this whole time. Maybe this wasn't even the first date. Maybe I'd been the fool in a story she was writing behind my back for months. That night, I made myself a promise. If she wanted to play games, fine. But I wasn't going to be the clueless husband anymore. I was going to find out everything. The sound of the door closing behind her was like a gunshot. I didn't move for what felt like an hour. My brain was spinning, running through every conversation we'd had in the last few months. Every time she'd been working late. Every weird look she gave me when I asked about her day. I wanted to tell myself this was just a bluff, some twisted way to get my attention. But deep down, I knew this wasn't new. This wasn't the first time she'd thought about walking out on me. It was just the first time she'd said it out loud. I finally stood up, the ice in my glass long melted, and wandered around the living room like a ghost. Her jacket was gone, but her phone charger was still on the table. That's when I noticed something on the floor next to the chair where she'd dropped her purse earlier, a crumpled receipt. I almost didn't pick it up, but something about the faint smear of lipstick on it caught my eye. It wasn't from today. It was from 3 nights ago, dinner for 2, a wine bottle, and a place I'd never heard of. My stomach sank. I sat down with that little piece of paper in my hand, staring at it like it was evidence in a crime scene. Maybe it was. Maybe I was already the victim and just hadn't realized it. I wanted to scream, to call her, and demand answers, but I didn't. Instead, I decided to wait. For once in my life, I wanted her to walk back through that door without realizing I'd just stepped off the edge of whatever game she thought she was playing. 2 hours passed. 3. The house felt like it was swallowing me whole. I tried to distract myself, but every creak of the floorboards made my heart race. When I finally heard her car pull up, I forced myself to sit still. She came in quietly, as if she was hoping I'd be asleep. Her hair smelled like a perfume I didn't recognize, not hers. She didn't say a word, and neither did I. But I knew something had shifted. I wasn't going to let this go. I couldn't. As I lay there pretending to sleep, I decided I was done being blind. Starting tomorrow, I would dig until I found the truth, no matter how ugly it was. I had no idea how deep this rabbit hole was going to go, or how much it would destroy me, but I wasn't backing down anymore. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm, staring at the ceiling with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Marlene was still asleep beside me, her breathing steady, as if nothing had happened the night before. I looked at her face, at the faint traces of makeup she hadn't washed off, and wondered if she'd been laughing at me while she was out with him. That thought was like a knife twisting in my chest. For years, I'd been the quiet, dependable husband who worked hard and trusted her without question. But trust felt like a joke now. I wasn't Curtis the husband anymore. I was Curtis the investigator. I slipped out of bed carefully, my mind already building a plan. I didn't want to confront her yet. No, that would give her the upper hand. I wanted to know everything, where she went, who she was with, and how long this had been going on. By the time she woke up, I was already sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through a cheap tracking app I'd just installed on my spare phone. I wasn't proud of it. In fact, I felt sick as I entered her car's license plate into the database. But I had no choice. I needed proof. something I couldn't ignore. That day, I played the part of the clueless husband. I asked her if she had plans for the weekend, and she casually told me she might meet a friend for coffee. She didn't even look me in the eye when she said it. I nodded, smiled like an idiot, and offered to cook dinner that night. She smiled back, but it was a hollow smile, the kind you give someone when you're already thinking about someone else. When she left for work, I followed her. Not close enough for her to notice, but close enough to confirm what I'd suspected. She didn't go straight to the office. She stopped at a cafe on the other side of town, the kind of place we'd never been together. Through the window, I saw her sitting across from a man I didn't recognize. He was leaning in close, and she was laughing. Laughing in that way I hadn't heard in years. My stomach turned to stone. I didn't confront her then. I just watched, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. I felt like I was watching my life crumble from the outside. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. She was living another life, and I'd been too blind to see it. When she finally left the cafe, I drove home ahead of her, parked my car like nothing had happened, and waited. I had a decision to make: keep pretending or dig deeper until I had every single answer. That night, while she was in the shower, I took her phone. My hands shook as I scrolled through her messages. But what I found wasn't just heartbreaking. It was terrifying. There were messages from numbers I didn't recognize, photos I wish I hadn't seen, and plans for nights she told me she was working late. I knew I was in too deep now. I couldn't just walk away. Not yet. I needed to know how far this went, and who this man really was. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized something that chilled me to the bone. Marlene wasn't just hiding him from me. She was hiding something bigger, something that didn't make sense. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every line of every text I'd just read. The man from the cafe wasn't just some coworker she was flirting with. His messages were far too personal, too familiar, like they'd been tangled up in each other's lives for a long time. But something didn't add up. There were gaps in their conversations, strange references to keeping things quiet and the next step that sounded like more than just an affair. It wasn't about sneaking around for fun. It sounded like they were planning something. By morning, I was running on adrenaline. Marlene acted as if nothing was wrong. She hummed while making her coffee, kissed me on the cheek, and said she'd be staying late at the office. I almost laughed in her face. Instead, I mumbled something about working late myself, and she left without a second glance. The moment the door clicked shut, I went into full detective mode. Her laptop was sitting on the kitchen counter. She usually kept it password protected, but to my surprise, it was still open from the night before. My hands trembled as I dug through her emails, and that's when I found something that made my blood run cold. There were messages not just to him, but to someone else, a woman named Felicity, someone I'd never heard of. The emails weren't about love or work. They were about money. I scrolled further and found talk of accounts, deadlines, and covering tracks. It sounded less like an affair and more like they were conspiring to hide something big. There was even a spreadsheet attached to one of the emails, full of transfers and amounts I couldn't begin to understand. My wife wasn't just cheating on me. She was involved in something I couldn't wrap my head around. And the more I looked, the more I realized how little I actually knew about the woman I married. That evening, I pretended everything was fine. I smiled when she walked through the door, asked how her day at the office went, and cooked her favorite meal like I hadn't spent all day tearing apart her secrets. But every time she looked at me, I wondered if she could tell. Did she know I was onto her? Did she see the storm brewing behind my forced grin? After dinner, I excused myself to grab something from the car. But what I was really doing was planting a small tracker under her seat. I needed to know where she was going, who she was meeting, and why the hell my wife seemed to be living a double life. I sat in the driveway for a long time after that, gripping the steering wheel, my heart pounding in my ears. I wasn't sure what scared me more, that she was cheating on me, or that I was starting to realize I didn't recognize the person sleeping next to me anymore. The tracker I had planted under Marlene's car felt like a burning secret in my pocket all day. Every time I glanced at my phone and saw the app running, my chest tightened. That little blinking dot represented every truth she thought I was too weak to discover. I'd spent the last few days pretending to be the same harmless, clueless husband she'd always underestimated, but my mind was a hurricane. I was done being the fool in her story. That night, I watched her get ready, every movement of hers calculated and graceful, like a woman preparing for a night she didn't want her husband to know about. I tried to keep my voice steady when I asked, "Working late again?" She smiled, but it wasn't her real smile. It was the polite, hollow smile you give to a stranger on the street. "Yeah, it might be a long one," she said casually, grabbing her bag. I nodded, acting like I believed every word. The second she drove off, I grabbed my keys and followed her location on the tracker. I didn't tail her car directly, I kept my distance, my own headlights blending into the flow of traffic as I watched that blinking dot move further away from home. She didn't head toward her office, which I'd expected. Instead, she drove out of the city, taking back roads I didn't recognize. My hands tightened around the steering wheel, a sick mix of fear and anticipation swirling in my gut. After almost 40 minutes, she stopped at a place I'd never seen before, an old industrial building on the edge of a nearly deserted street. It looked like the kind of place that had been abandoned years ago, but there were lights glowing through the windows. I parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, my heart pounding louder with every step. I peeked through a cracked window, and what I saw didn't make sense. Marlene wasn't alone. The man from the cafe was there, along with the mysterious woman from her emails, Felicity. They were huddled around a table, their faces serious, papers and laptops scattered everywhere. It didn't look romantic. It looked dangerous. At one point, Marlene pulled out a black envelope and handed it to the man. He counted something inside, cash, I think, and Felicity was scribbling notes like they were finalizing some kind of deal. I ducked away before they could see me, my mind racing. This wasn't just infidelity. It was something else entirely, something that felt too big for me to handle. Was I looking at a crime? Were they laundering money, running some kind of scheme? The thought that my wife might be part of something criminal hit me like a sledgehammer. By the time I got home, my hands were still shaking. When she returned hours later, I was sitting on the couch pretending to watch TV. I didn't ask her where she'd been. She didn't offer an explanation. But there was something different in the way she looked at me, like she was testing whether I'd finally snap. I didn't, not yet, because now I needed more than just proof of betrayal. I needed to know the whole story, and I had no idea that what I was about to find would be worse than anything I'd imagined. I didn't sleep for 2 nights after following her. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that old industrial building, the table stacked with cash, and the cold, focused look on Marlene's face as she worked with those 2 strangers like they were a team, like they had been doing this for a long time. This wasn't the Marlene I knew, or maybe this was the Marlene I'd never known. The thought gnawed at me, keeping me awake, and by the 3rd day I knew I had to stop guessing and start digging. I started with the man from the cafe. I had snapped a blurry photo of him when I was parked outside the building, and with the help of a reverse image search and a few late-night dives into obscure social media accounts, I learned his name. Connor Hale. The deeper I went, the worse it got. Connor wasn't just some random guy. He had a record, a serious one. Fraud, theft, even a rumored connection to a scam operation that had shut down a few years ago. It was like peeling back layers of rotting wood, and every new detail made me question if Marlene had been lying to me since the day we met. But it wasn't until I looked into Felicity that everything started to click in a way that made my blood run cold. Felicity wasn't just someone from Marlene's emails. She was someone from Marlene's past. I found an old photo online, buried in the archive of a local news article about a family-owned boutique that had been caught up in a tax evasion scandal. And there was Marlene, standing next to a younger Felicity, both of them smiling for the camera like lifelong friends. The boutique had been shut down, and Felicity's family had been investigated for fraud. Marlene had never mentioned any of this to me, not once. I couldn't shake the feeling that what they were doing now wasn't just about cheating. It was about finishing something they had started years ago. Some unfinished business that had dragged my wife back into the shadows. I needed to know what role she played in all this. Was she just being manipulated by them? Or was she leading the charge? The next night, I made a reckless decision. I followed her again, but this time I didn't just watch from the shadows. I waited until Connor and Felicity left the building. Then I slipped inside. The place was eerily quiet. The table was still there, littered with papers and files, some of them marked with numbers and coded words I didn't understand. I snapped as many photos as I could before I heard a door creak from the other side of the room. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. It was Marlene. She was standing there, staring at me like she'd just seen a ghost. But her expression wasn't anger or shock. It was something worse, something cold and calculating. "What are you doing here, Curtis?" she asked, her voice steady, as if she'd been expecting me all along. In that moment, I realized something terrifying. Whatever this was, whatever game she was playing, she wasn't going to let me stay on the sidelines anymore. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I wanted to walk away. Not yet. Not until I knew the full truth. I don't think I've ever felt as cornered as I did when Marlene caught me in that abandoned building. The air between us was heavy, thick with the kind of tension that makes every sound, every heartbeat, echo like a drum. She didn't scream or accuse me of following her. She didn't even look surprised. Instead, she closed the door behind her and leaned against it, folding her arms as if this was just another casual conversation. That calmness, that eerie confidence, made me feel like I had stumbled into a world where I didn't belong, a world she had built behind my back. "What are you doing here, Curtis?" she repeated, slower this time, like each word was a warning. I stared at her, my mouth dry, clutching my phone in my hand with the photos I'd just taken. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but all I could say was, "What is this? Who are these people? What the hell is going on?" My voice cracked on the last word, a pathetic sound that made me hate myself a little more. She tilted her head, that half smirk curling back onto her lips. "You always want everything to be simple, don't you? Curtis, not everything is as black and white as you think." Her tone was cold, almost amused, and that was enough to push me over the edge. "Simple? You've been lying to me, sneaking around, meeting with criminals. Yeah, I know who Connor is, and don't even get me started on Felicity. Did you think I'd never find out? Did you think I was that stupid?" My voice was shaking, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from a rage I didn't even know I had. She sighed, pushing herself off the door and walking toward me slowly, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. "You don't know anything," she said, her voice low and deliberate. "Connor isn't just some criminal. And Felicity? She's family. Everything I've done for a reason. But you were never supposed to see this part of me." I wanted to demand an explanation, but her eyes, cold, sharp, made me hesitate. "What part of you, Marlene? The liar? The stranger? The person who's been living a life I don't even recognize?" My voice cracked again, and I felt that familiar burn of humiliation in my chest. I hated how weak I sounded, how small I felt standing in front of her like this. She paused, studying me, almost as if she was deciding how much truth I could handle. "You've always thought I was this safe, predictable person. The wife who cooks dinner, kisses you goodnight, smiles at the neighbors. But, Curtis, I've been carrying something for years, something that was supposed to stay buried. And now, thanks to you, it's coming back to destroy everything." Her words felt like poison seeping into my veins. "What are you talking about? What are you hiding?" I asked, stepping closer. But she just smiled, a bitter, almost broken smile, and said, "You want to know? Fine. Follow me tomorrow night, watch closely, then you'll see who I really am." And with that, she walked past me, her perfume lingering in the air like a ghost. I stood there frozen, clutching my phone, realizing that I had no idea what I'd just stepped into. That night, I couldn't even bring myself to lie in the same bed with her. I stayed on the couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was living with someone who might destroy me without blinking. Yet, despite every instinct screaming at me to run, I knew I would follow her the next night. I had to. Because whatever was coming, it wasn't just about an affair anymore. It was about something far darker, and I wasn't ready for the truth that waited on the other side. The next night felt like the longest of my life. I followed Marlene's car again, my heart thudding in my chest as I watched her drive toward the outskirts of the city. The tracker's blinking dot was like a pulse on my phone screen, leading me closer and closer to answers I wasn't sure I wanted to find. I didn't care if she saw me this time. I was done hiding. Whatever this was, I needed the truth. She parked in the same industrial area as before, but something was different. There were more cars this time, and the building was buzzing with activity. I stayed back for a while, just watching, until I couldn't stand the suspense anymore. I walked inside, not caring if anyone stopped me, and what I saw stopped me cold. There were no stacks of cash on the table, no shady deals happening in the corners. Instead, the room was filled with boxes of supplies, medical kits, blankets, canned food. Connor and Felicity were there, but they weren't counting money. They were organizing donations, loading them into vans. I stood there, confused, my mind struggling to catch up. Marlene spotted me and walked over, her face a mix of frustration and something softer. "Curtis, I told you to follow me if you wanted the truth," she said, her voice steady. "This is the truth." She explained everything. Connor wasn't her lover, he was her cousin. Felicity wasn't some secret accomplice. She was a friend from years ago who ran a local nonprofit. The money transfers and accounts I had found were part of a private initiative they had started, funneling resources to struggling families who had fallen through the cracks of the system. Marlene had kept it all from me because she thought I'd worry about the risks and shut it down. She was right. I would have, if I'd known nothing about it. I felt like an idiot. All my paranoia, my sleepless nights, my anger. It was all built on half-truths and assumptions. I looked at her, ready to apologize, but she just shook her head and smiled faintly. "You always think I'm someone who needs saving, Curtis. But maybe I'm just someone who wanted to make a difference without asking for permission." I laughed, though it was shaky and full of relief. "You could have told me," I said. "I would have helped." Her eyes softened then, and she touched my hand. "Would you? Or would you have tried to talk me out of it because you were scared?" she asked. She was right again. I would have tried to protect her, but I realized that maybe loving someone isn't about keeping them safe all the time. It's about standing beside them, even when their path is hard. That night, I stayed. I helped load boxes into vans, met the volunteers, and saw a side of Marlene I'd never seen before. A side that was strong, fearless, and compassionate. By the time we drove home together, there was no anger left between us, just a quiet understanding. We sat in the driveway for a long time before going inside. I turned to her and said, "No more secrets, okay? If you're planning something, even something wild, I want to know." She smiled, this time genuinely, and nodded. "Deal." It wasn't a perfect ending. We still had to rebuild the trust that had cracked between us. But as we walked into the house that night, hand in hand, I realized that maybe this wasn't the end of our story. It was the start of something better.